In theory, you could say that every NFL game during the course of a season means the exact same. All teams play 16 games. All wins, all losses, all count as one in the column. So this whole notion of this game is bigger than the next game seems kind of silly. Fundamentally, that could make some sense, but the reality is that's just not true. Because there are certainly certain games that carry more weight throughout the course of the season. Your divisional games matter more, and then games within the conference matter more, and then it's the games outside of your conference, especially when you start thinking about playoff tiebreakers and playoff positioning and so forth. There are certain games that matter more than others. And you look at this game coming up on Sunday, it's a big one for both teams. The Bears travel to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Both teams at 6-7. Both teams on the bubble on the outside looking in on the playoff race in the NFC. Winner stays no worse than one game behind the Cardinals for that seventh and final spot in the wild card. Loser falls 2 games back, and for all intents and purposes, it's over. Like, even if you say, hey, the Cardinals lose in week 15, then you're still a game behind, and you got multiple teams you got to try and jump. It's a tall task. Not impossible, but certainly a tall task. And assuming the Cardinals win in week 15, you're sitting there 2 back with 2 to go. Not a good position to be in if you actually want to make the playoffs. And for the Minnesota Vikings, I understand. Like, you're probably in a position in a spot where you say, we've won too many games to look back now. We've got to go for it and got to try to make the playoffs. It's amazing. Like, the first month and a half of the season, you had a lot of Vikings fans talking about tanking and throwing the season. And as bad as they looked, I can completely understand and I completely agree. Like, if they continue to lose, you might as well lose them all and try to improve your draft position and do some house cleaning. But you're probably more realistic at saying, we've tied our future in the immediacy to Kirk Cousins, and as a result, he's not going anywhere, probably not going to be in a position to draft a new quarterback right now anyways that will make an impact right away. So got to try and go for it. Makes sense. Whereas the Chicago Bears, I think it's a bit of a different story, where this is the peak, the epitome of the mediocrity of a McCaskey way, sitting at 6-7 after the 5-1 start. And you got Bears fans all giggly tits about, hey, they could win their last 4 and potentially make the playoffs. And Mitchell Trubisky might have found something. And all this other dumb crap that's just not true. And even if it was true, why the hell would you want it to be true? You want them to win their last 4 games of the season so they can finish 9-7 and maybe squeak into the playoffs as a 7 seed and get bounced in the first round? Like, just think about how dangerous that would be to the future of this organization. That leads to Nagy probably returning. That leads to Pace certainly returning and possibly getting a contract extension. Why, oh why in the Sam Blue hell would you want that to happen? Like, you're this close to a true house cleaning that goes all the way up the levels of the organization up to and including Ted Phillips. Why do you want that progress to stop now? For a couple of meaningless wins that, even if you win out, still may not guarantee you a spot in the playoffs. All the while, just one more loss moves you to 6-8, moves you to 2 games behind the Cardinals, assuming Arizona wins in week 15, still puts you a game behind the Minnesota Vikings, but in reality, puts you almost 2 games behind the Vikings because Minnesota, if they win Sunday, will have swept the season series. And even if they win, now you go a game ahead of the Vikings, okay, then if the Cardinals win, you're still a game behind with 2 to go, and you still got Green Bay on the schedule coming up in week 17, who might be playing for the number 1 seed in a first-round bye in the playoffs. So good luck with that. Good fucking luck with that. And I know you're going to look at the earlier season matchup, and you're going to say, for both teams, Minnesota's going to say, oh, we handled them once. We can do it again. You didn't handle them that well. Like, the Bears' offense absolutely sucked, but it was with Foles at quarterback, and he absolutely sucks. But you still had to score a touchdown in the fourth quarter to win the game. is you gave up the special teams return touchdown to Cordero Patterson. You still didn't even put up 20 points on the board against a Bears defense that is not what it was a couple of years ago. So, like, Minnesota Vikings fans might walk into this game with some confidence or some desire to talk some shit, but you really ain't got shit to talk about right now, and that's the truth. Now, you squeaked by on that Monday night game several weeks back. You won 19-13. And as far as Bears fans might sit there and say, well, there's a different team this time. They won last week. They've got the sniff of the playoffs in spite of the midseason swoon, and it's Mitchell starting. It's not Foles. It's all of this and all that. Let me guess. The Bears with Trubisky have had good success against the Vikings the past couple of years. Whoop-de-skipped, whoop-de-woo. What does it all mean? Nothing. It's this season. And you got those Bears fans who are going to talk about how this offense is starting to really string some stuff together and show some life. Stop. Just stop. They were embarrassed by the Packers. And the Packers defense stinks. The last 2 weeks, you say offensively they've been a little bit better, but they've been playing against two teams whose defenses not only also stink, but they were so bad this year they had already fired both their head coach and their general manager in the Lions and Texans respectively. The Vikings have not done that. Give me a fucking break here. And this is still a Bears team that managed in the first matchup to score a whopping 6 points on offense. And Trubisky is no massive upgrade over Nick Foles, so don't kid yourself. This Bears team will still struggle to run the goddamn ball most of the year. They have. So why would this be any different now? Because even if you point to, well, David Montgomery had that first run go for 80 yards and a touchdown, and then what did he do the rest of the game? And as far as the past couple of weeks, Trubisky being better, A, it's been against really crappy defenses. B, is because they have been shielding him, protecting him as much as they possibly can. It's a bunch of quick drops, quick releases, no decision type of I'm going to throw to one guy, so I'm only going to look at one guy. There's no reading the field. There's no going through progressions. There's none of that. Well, now you're facing a divisional opponent that's familiar with them and knows that better and knows the looks and knows the covered packages better. So it doesn't make that much of a difference. This is a big game on Sunday, though, for both teams. It really is. Because for the Vikings, a win keeps them alive in the playoff race and potentially RIP buries the Bears and keeps them out. For the Bears, a loss on Sunday eliminates all doubt and gets you closer to the top 10 in the draft. Now, if you're an idiot and you want them to win, you're still very likely not the 7th seed in the playoffs after week 15, and you still got to hope for some help by the Cardinals losing. And that doesn't even count for you. Still got 2 more games to go, and you can say, well, the Jags haven't done shit all year. They won the first game and lost everyone since. Yeah, and that's exactly the type of opponent historically that the Bears would allow themselves to lose to. And then you got week 17 facing Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is their daddy, and the Packers might be playing for the 1 seed, so they might potentially have a lot of urgency to play for because they would want that bye week. For this matchup, you look at it and you say the Bears are in a tough spot, especially if both Screen and Jalen Johnson are out, because then you're talking about Kendall Vildor and you're talking about Duke Shelley having to play a lot and going up against Thielen and Jefferson. That could be a recipe for disaster. Looking at this from a matchup standpoint, I don't know how the Bears match up with Justin Jefferson because they sure the hell didn't the first time around. So I would see absolutely no reason why they're going to be able to do it this second go-round. And I look at it and I say, if they're missing anybody else out of that defensive unit, Dalvin Cook could potentially have a big game. And even if the Bears have everybody on defense, whereas the Lions put up a ton of points on them 2 weeks ago, the Packers put a shit ton of points up on them 3 weeks ago. You say Houston didn't do anything against them last week, but that was Houston going out there with a stud QB and absolutely nobody else on offense. Nobody. All their top skill players were hurt. They were out. It's not an excuse. It's a justification. It's a reality. Minnesota comes into this game with their quarterback and their top 2 options in the pass game, their top running back. Like, they've got a full arsenal of weapons. So, it's a road game, which doesn't really matter, I think, as much in the 2020 pandemic world. You don't really have fans there, but it's not a good spot. There's a big part of me that wants to pick the Bears to win this week just so I can officially put the Jeff jinx on them and end this stupid shit once and for all. But I don't feel like I should have to do that. I shouldn't have to sacrifice my weekly picks just to make sure the right thing happens. Not yet. Gets any scarier, then I'm going to have to do just that. So you've been warned, Bears. Lose them all. Lose them all. Because if you don't, I'll put the jinx on your asses. And it'll be really ugly really quick. But I could argue that this may be the biggest game in recent Bears history. You might say, well, the playoff loss to the Eagles in the wild card round 2 years ago. Yeah. But this one potentially deals with the future of the organization for the next several years to come. Like, this is a big one. And you can certainly argue it deals with some of the future of the Vikings too, so it's a pretty big one for them. I think Minnesota's a better team. They've got the better quarterback. They've got the better offense, and I think that's what matters. The Bears' defense is not what it once was. I could expect to see some type of similar type of game to what we saw earlier in the year on primetime. Probably, though, a little bit more offense from both sides. This feels more like a 27-23 or 27-20 type of Vikings victory. But I just can't in good faith pick this Bears team because of the fact that they beat the Houston Texans, who were depleted and had already fired their head coach and general manager. Who was one and the same person? Bob! Beating a Bob-built team is no indication of great success to come for your squad. Lose them all, Chicago! It's the only hope we have for the future.